This is the ChatGPT and graduate research webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know there's a lot of information that our guest speakers would like to cover today. So my name is Kristen Connors. I'm part of graduate division here at Manoa. I'll be your moderator and technical support. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of ChatGPT though, I'd like to leave you with some thoughts to consider. So wherever you may go for your research, whatever you may be studying in graduate school, I do encourage you to be mindful of place. And when I speak of place, I mean for that to include the history, people, and land. As a native, visitor, guest, or however you identify, please think of your positionality in relation to the full context of place. So again, I leave you with those thoughts as we enter into today's session. Today, we are joined by Manoa Hamilton librarians Jonathan Young and Sarah Nakashima, who examine the usefulness of ChatGPT related to graduate student scholarly research tasks, as well as exploring use cases, limitations, and best practices in creating effective prompts while considering the responsible use of this technology. So please let me welcome Jonathan and Sarah. If you want to share a little bit about yourselves and then get us started.
All right. Well, good morning. Yes, it's still morning. Good morning. So I'm Sarah. I'm the humanities librarian here at the University of Hawaii Manoa Hamilton Library. And I am going to start off today sharing with you what we are looking at in terms of generative AI and how we are wanting to think about use and the ethics of it in our research. Jonathan, do you want to do a quick intro?
Hi, I am also a librarian here at Hamilton Library. I am the science librarian for natural sciences, and I'll be talking to you after Sarah does.
Great. All right. So let's jump right in then. So ChatGPT and graduate research, I'm sure that's why we're all here. Move things so I can see. Okay. So who we are, Sarah, Jonathan, and we like to partner in doing these workshops. So we have kind of right brain, left brain going on as we approach different research aspects and to help reach more of you who are joining us today. So today what we're hoping to talk about or have you walk away with is an understanding of how generative AI works and how to use it effectively and efficiently, and how this can be used within your graduate studies in a ethical and a safe manner. We're going to talk about the dangers of use in terms of detection in academic work, and then talk about it in terms of future, what's coming, and possible different scenarios that you could be incorporating this in. So as we share today, you may have questions which you are welcome to put into Q&A, but we will be answering those at the end of our presentation today. Okay, so to start, wanting to just clarify that we are talking about AI, but we are not going to be talking about it as a technology. We're going to be talking about it in a performative sense, and to help you think about use and the ways in which you can use this responsibly and ethically again. And again, recognizing that a lot of this is changing. I think every week Jonathan comes and tells me a new update that he's very excited about with ChatGPT. And so recognizing that we're sharing foundational elements with you and that things are going to be evolving and have evolved very rapidly within the past year or so. So first, just to kind of establish ChatGPT or generative pre-trained transformer. This is a large language model. Its purpose is to look at data and predict the next words input that are going to be kind of helping you along the way. It's meant to work as sort of a autocomplete in a sense. Again, it's a language processor. It is not necessarily coming up with new or original information. It is using that data, which it's given, which it's already been trained on, to create answers that you're going to be looking at. So it has capabilities and limitations like everything else. So it's, again, really great at language, and that is its main purpose. It understands requests that are given to it and can format output in various styles and answers, which we have a lot of fun playing with. But there are limitations. It's not connected to a database. Its trained knowledge is not current. So there are limitations in its kind of scope and understanding of the different areas in which you may be using it for. And it's not necessarily meant to create new things. So it hallucinates very convincingly, which we've all kind of seen those different reports of it creating citations or different people and references in which it's regarding to or regards. And then just the limitation of, as with everything that we are using to help us with our research, we want to consider the biases which can be included within it, and then also recognize that it's not something that we just use blindly, but we want to look at it critically, anything that it is outputting, and really determine whether or not it's effective in the use that we are intending it for. So this is ChatGPT on a very, very basic foundational level. I'm also going to be showing Google Bard today, so I thought I would also just talk about it real quick. So its purpose is to really allow for natural language questions rather than keywords or things like that that we kind of have to use when we are utilizing library or database platforms. It doesn't just list answers. It always has like a kind of paragraph explanation of like how it came up with what it's giving you, and warnings about information might not always be correct, and you need to do your job following up with that information. And then it's a very conversational thing or platform. So it's always ends its answer with like, I hope this helps. Maybe this will help you think of new things and you have fun with creating this sort of research thing. So you very much feel like you are talking back and forth with somebody, which is kind of, it's a little, you know, I don't know, sometimes I'm like, is there someone on the other end of this? And then there's a lot of features in it because it is Google, it is somewhat connected to the internet. And so there are ways for you to double check information that it is giving you, and has different ways of kind of filtering through that information that you are looking at in its output. So those are the two platforms that we're going to be showing you. And since I'm going first, I get to show you Google Bard. And we're going to be using this today, or thinking about it in different kind of case scenarios. And so first we're going to talk about writing enhancement and using these tools in that way. So we've seen, you know, the stories of people asking it to write it papers, write letters and things like that. And we want to caution against just using it in this blanket fashion. What we are encouraging you to think of in terms of ChatGPT and Google Bard is think of it as sort of your study partner or your study buddy, and it helping you come up with different perspectives, different ideas of how you may want to be approaching your research and the questions that you are going to have. So it's really great at helping you come up with those research questions, creating outlines, helping you think about different places to go to find your information, helping you revise the language in which you are engaging with or wanting to utilize, and then helping you think about how to create search strings and ways of finding that information that will go back to your research question. So for this, we're going to start by thinking about it in terms of the research and helping us with kind of the enhancement of what it is that we're looking at. And first thing that it can do is it can help us kind of create an abstract. So with a prompt, I asked it to create a 250-word article abstract on academic librarians offering research instruction to undergraduate students, focusing on information sources found on social media and evaluating them for effectiveness and using them in college writing courses. For this, it's about 264 words, so it's a little over 250. And it always kind of gives this format of an introduction paragraph, kind of bullet notes of what you could possibly be looking at when writing this paper, and then sort of almost like a conclusion-esque second paragraph, and then keywords to better describe what it is that you are looking at within this abstract. When using Google Bard, you have the option of looking at 3 different scenarios that it's going to kind of come up with, and they all sort of follow the same format. They all don't necessarily look like you would expect with a 250-word abstract if you're thinking about it in terms of at the beginning of a paper. But what I've appreciated about what it comes up with is it really kind of walks you through how you may go about writing the paper itself, and things that you want to consider as you're going through it. So it's really helpful in kind of coming up with that research idea when you are trying to formulate it and thinking through how you would best describe this work that you are going about. So in that, when we then kind of have set the area in which we are researching and what we are wanting to learn from it, we can then ask it to create an academic article outline, create an article outline utilizing that abstract that we have just created. And with that, it then gives us sort of this introduction, a 3-paragraph body, and then a conclusion. It will also always caution you at the end of what it's created, like, this is just a sample. You may want to change things depending on your requirements for your assignment. It'll also let you know that you can broaden or narrow different focuses of the outline that it's offering you. And it, again, is very conversational and really allowing you to think through how you want to think about the output that it is giving you, and then reuse parts of it to better suit what it is that you are looking at. And once we've kind of created sort of an outline, it then gives you different ways of thinking about your topic as a whole. So starting with the abstract to kind of give an idea of what kind of paper is it that I am thinking about writing, and then an outline to sort of think about where could I go within this particular scenario. You can also ask it to help you come up with possible research questions based off of what it's outputting for you on your particular topic. And this might be a kind of a backward way of looking at it, but it kind of made sense in my mind when I was putting this together. So thinking about this outline that we have, then what are the possible research questions that we can come up with based off what it is that we're looking at? And so when we ask it to do that, it gives us these 5 suggestions, and it tells you that you can narrow or broaden the scope of your research depending on your interest. Again, it's very conversational. And so when we're looking at this, like, they're interesting questions. They're okay in the way that we're written, but maybe I want to rephrase them again because I'm trying to write something that's academic in nature, and I want to be able to, I don't know, think about it in a little more intellectual manner. So then looking at these research questions, I asked it to restate the research questions with more sophisticated academic vocabulary. And it does that, restating in a sophisticated academic vocabulary. But what I appreciate about it is then tells you what changes were made and why they were made. So we can see we've replaced common words with more sophisticated synonyms, using more formal academic language, and it's telling you which words it's switching out and where those are. And then more specific or nuanced language. So I thought that one was kind of funny. But I really appreciate, you can see how the questions evolve and become again, more sophisticated, but they become something that you can actually look at and think through writing a paper with. Whereas I think these are great questions to help us just think about our topic as a whole and kind of why we are asking the question, why are we getting into this research area? What is it that we could possibly be touching on? So helping you again to rethink what it is that you are doing with your research, helping you think about the questions that you want to be asking, rephrasing them in a way that's really going to guide you as you are doing your research. And so this can be helpful in those moments when you're kind of stuck and in trying to figure out what it is that you are looking at, or even what sort of information or audience is going to be specific or necessary for this type of research. This can be a way for you to kind of have a back and forth with someone who's not necessarily there, but can help rethink, again, perspectives or ways of considering the research that you are conducting. And so in addition to helping us think through the vocabulary that you are using and the ways in which we are approaching this research, it can help us think about information sources. So sometimes we get really stuck on looking for those articles and those books because we know that's necessary for our literature, but thinking outside of the box into different types of resources can be really helpful. With this one, I asked it to find or to suggest possible information sources to include without being general, because I found that, you know, it's a 50-50 chance of whether it's going to generate something that's actually out there and existent, and then those hallucinations that sound really good. And I've come across a couple that I'm like, why isn't this a paper? I would really appreciate reading this. So this can be a way for us to, again, be thinking about the types of information that we are including and why they might be particularly important to the research and the topic as we are approaching it. I've also found that it's helpful in regenerating this. So when asking this question, maybe we ask it to revise the resources that it's recommending, and then it will go through and take out government documents and white papers, for example, and it brings in different types of information sources. And again, I think we get really bogged down in what it is that we're looking at, or we tend to go to those familiar sources. And so this can be a helpful way for us to be thinking about those information sources that we are bringing into our research. And then in addition to thinking about where we are going to go for information, it is really fun and helpful in thinking about titles. I don't know, this is something that I think as academics, as aspiring academics, we don't really spend that much time on our titles. In my library workshops that I offer for undergraduates, I'm always saying that academic titles are not very exciting. They're definitely not clickbaity in the way that they are referring to the research of the article itself. And so this could be a way for us to generate the idea of how are we titling, or the ways that we are coming up of describing the research that we are creating. This is specifically for academic titles. And I think you can kind of see that in the language that's being used here, but it's sometimes interesting to also ask it to create a clickbaity title based off of your research question and the generations that it's created so far, to really map through how the different language and the different ways that we can kind of approach our topic, again, really evolving the ways that we are thinking about it. All of this too is within the same research scope. So asking it to refer back to the outlines or the abstracts that it's already come up with to utilize this sort of output can be helpful, again, as you're in one sort of mode. And then thinking about where you are wanting to publish your work can help you look at the works that they are already creating, putting out. It can help you think about scope in terms of the information sources you're wanting to create, the audience that you're writing to, those research questions that are accepted by the journals, right, as being something that they publish. And then what you are doing in terms of your own vocabulary and the effectiveness of the literature and the data that you are including as well. And so helping you really think as you are starting your research from the very beginning of kind of mapping out what are you doing with the work that you're creating, right? And where is it going to go, and who is going to be reading it. So this asking it to generate some places that might want to publish this article that I'm supposedly working on can then really help me think about, again, who that audience is and what I'm creating for them, or what I'm gathering as being effective for them. And I think it helps also to do this work before we necessarily start our research. If those of you who may have come to our other workshops about starting our research and finding those sources and starting the lit review, we talk about having an idea of what you are looking for before you even begin, right? And having an understanding of where you are going as you are starting your research process. And so this is really an effective way of helping you think through those things as you are kind of wrestling with that. Within those workshops, we also have you pair up and we have you talk about your work, right? And have you help each other in thinking through what it is that you are pursuing. And so when you don't have the luxury of having somebody next to you who may or may not be an expert in your area, utilizing these tools in this way to help you think through these questions, again, to give you different ideas and perspectives, can be another tool, another way of you putting in that pre-work before you begin that research, and again, having an understanding of what it is that you're looking for. So some ways in which you are helping yourself really establish where you are going with the work that you are doing. In addition to this, when we have an idea then of where we're going and the different areas that we are touching on, the different information we are wanting to find, this can also be a way to help us think through how we are creating our search strategies and the different keywords or Boolean that we are going to be creating. And again, this is something we talk about in our other workshops. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, sign up for those next time. But search strategies within Google Bard. So again, we're still sticking with my topic of academic librarianship and information literacy. I've asked it to come up with suggested keywords and Boolean search strings based on the article or the outline it had created for me previously. And so this can be a way of really thinking through that vocabulary, that language that you are utilizing to find the information that you are searching for, right? So we have these lovely list of keywords on the side, and I appreciated that it also has these alternate terms. We talk about synonyms a lot within research as being really helpful ways of broadening or narrowing different aspects of your research and the focus that you are creating, including. So it comes up with this list, which we can, take and run with, or we can look at and decide whether or not we want to branch off into other types of synonyms. And then it creates these really lovely Boolean search strings. Again, we talk about these in our other workshops, but the power of and, or, and not when you are searching and creating these really specific and conclusive search strings to help you identify those information sources. And so I thought it did a really great job of combining the keywords and the alternative terms that it gave me within the different search strings. So you'll notice that it starts out by giving me and then it incorporates or, and then it incorporates or and specifically. And then it also incorporates not. So you can see that we just have this evolution of these search strings. And then before each type of search string, it explains what these Boolean operators are doing. So for example, this search string will return results that contain articles about academic librarians offering research instruction to undergraduate students on social media, focusing on information sources and evaluation. So it shows me that there. And then you can use Boolean operators to exclude certain results from your search. For example, you could use the not operator to exclude results that contain the keyword Twitter. So it's not just creating these search strings for you or these keywords for you and then expecting you to kind of take them and run with it. It's really giving you an explanation for why they were created, what is the intention for it. And I think that, again, is a helpful way for us to consider our research, especially as sometimes when we get into the weeds, we get really overwhelmed by things that we're looking at, or we can get frustrated with things that we are not finding that we expect to be finding. And so when we get to that point, using AI to help us think about the keywords that we are using and the ways that we are combining them to create better search strings can be really helpful, and help you, again, think through what are you expecting to find with your information. So I really appreciate that it's always going to give an explanation for what it's creating, and the expectation of what type of information you are going to be getting with those different search strings. So that's Google Bard and the kind of fun things that I wanted to share with you. And I'm going to pass it off to Jonathan now.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. All right, it's my turn. I'm going to talk to you about ChatGPT, which is the generative AI that I use most often. And I saw that there's a question about how to use it on the desktop. So I thought I'd start off just by showing how you get there and what it looks like. So before we go to my slides, so here I Googled OpenAI ChatGPT. OpenAI is the company behind it. This is kind of the first big generative AI to hit the scene and take the public's imagination. And you just click on this first link, ChatGPT here, and it'll ask you, if you don't have an account, it'll ask you to create an account. So accounts are free, though they will use your data. So I don't know how free you consider that, but you don't have to pay money. You do have to provide a phone number, and then you will have a free account. And so once you do have one, your interface, once you get on the web app version, will look like this. And I want to point this out because, this to many people looks just like a Google search bar, right? You've got this small bar down here that says message ChatGPT. But what I want to encourage you is to not think of it as a search bar, right? Because in a search bar, you would type in a few words to ask for your question to get some information. But in this case, you actually can put in thousands of words and you will get good responses from that. In fact, better responses. So this is a paradigm shift in how to think about how to interface with this technology that's completely different from a database or from Google. And I'll demonstrate that, right? So let's say we have this academic paper. We can paste in all of this to this interface and say, summarize this for me, please. And I can paste in all of that, right? So you would never see a Google search like this. But in ChatGPT, this is normal and this is actually good. So you can do this and it will start writing its summary. And this is probably, my favorite use for this technology is summarization. It's the use that I make use of in my own work. So, here as a librarian, we have to deal with a lot of text. We have to review books. We have to, look at reference transactions. And I have apps that allow me to use ChatGPT to analyze these for various factors. So there's its summary of that abstract. It's kind of the same length. So maybe, it could have done a better job. But I'll show you that you can actually tell it to do a better job using various prompts. Okay, so this is summarization. And so I kind of also want to go back and talk about how not to think of this kind of technology, right? So this is an example. This is a tech reporter who are, several months into, the year. This has been out for several months now. And was trying to use summarization, right? And I was just struck by this because this, tech reporter absolutely is using ChatGPT in the wrong way, right? So ChatGPT has ingested a huge amount of data. And my advice on how to think about that is not that it's a database like Google. When you put data into Google, it adds to its capabilities because it can draw upon more data. But for these generative AIs, when they give them more data, basically what they're doing is teaching it how to read better, how to read and write better. They're not adding it as factual information in its database, right? So it's just generating language. It doesn't have a connection to its internal capabilities in any way. So when this reporter asked the chatbot to list its capabilities, that's a really silly thing to do, because it's just going to come up with some word that sound good, right? It has absolutely no bearing in its actual capabilities. Then they use it incorrectly, right? So they say summarize this and paste this this URL. And of course, ChatGPT gets it wrong, and they say, "Wow, how horrible! Nothing is accurate. It hallucinates these things." But basically, what they were doing with it is basically saying, "Generate some words about this." About this URL, right? So it did its best job. It came up with what that title could have been about. So I did the exact same thing, but instead of pasting in that URL, I pasted in their entire article, summarize this article, right? So it's like 2,000 words. And now ChatGPT, because it knows how to read in a sense, it does a great summary, right? So these are the actual 3, extensions that was in the article. And as far as I could tell, these are all accurate. And this is a great condensation of that article. So I think if that reporter had thought about how ChatGPT was actually working, they would have done a better job. And I hope you will also do a better job now thinking about how ChatGPT actually works. So what you want to avoid is kind of in general always asking for information or summaries without any reference data, right? Another way to think about it that I think about is ChatGPT is kind of like a person who has read a ton of books and had a lot of conversations with a lot of experts about many, many things. And now you're coming to see this person, at a picnic, and they don't have any books in front of them. They're just, you're just catching them off guard, and you're going to ask them something. They might know kind of like in general about a lot of things, but they're not going to have, access to facts, dates, data, and you wouldn't expect them, right, to be able to list off facts just like that, right? So even for relatively well-known topics, I wouldn't recommend using it as kind of like Google, right? Don't say summarize the theory of relativity for me. It might do a pretty decent job, but the problem is you never know when it's going to slip in something that's wrong or in a different domain. And the way I like to think about this is because these AIs have been trained on a huge data set of internet data, social media data, books, literature. If there's an alternate domain that could have been in literature about that topic, there's a chance, however small, that it could slip into that domain. So for instance, if you ask it to explain the motion of the sun and the moon, 99% of the time, you'll get a pretty good answer because this is a pretty common scientific topic. There's probably lots of Wikipedia pages on it. But once in a while, it'll slip in something that someone from the Flat Earth Society has written about the motion of the sun and the moon, right? Because that's just text to it. And there's a chance it's going to go to that text and start writing from that text instead of from everything else. So if you think about the domains of fan fiction or satire, you don't want to risk that the factual information you're asking about is suddenly coming from that. But if you provided information, it's very good at reading it. So this is the article I just showed you. And I did a demonstration in an in-class, in-person class when I had my 8-year-old daughter on a school holiday with me. She was acting as my TA. And I had her read this abstract, and I asked her what it was about. And she did her best, but wasn't quite sure what lycopene was or what this article was about. But when I asked ChatGPT to summarize it at the level of an 8-year-old, to allow an 8-year-old to understand it, then ChatGPT comes up with this summarization. And she very much enjoyed this, and she very much could understand what it was. And I told the graduate students I was teaching it to, if ChatGPT can summarize this academic article so that my 8-year-old can understand it, if you're having trouble with any point in it, it can probably help you understand it as well. So summarization I think is a great use of it, but the key is to provide it the reference text you need. And so this is how I like to call it my added information model. So, it's not a database, it's a language model, right? So it's producing language, its output is language. And whatever information you want it to work with, you have to provide yourself, right? So you provided instructions, but you may also have to provide it input and additional information sources or references. And then it can read those and combine them and come up with something that's useful. So in terms of actually making prompts, my recommendation is, use words like summarize at the level of an 8-year-old, summarize, give it some context about how you want it to summarize. You can ask it to use bullet point format, which makes it really condense things into really key points. You can ask it for main ideas, themes. You can ask it to analyze for styles and tones, key points relating to something, like if there's some subtopic you're really interested in, you can ask it for the key points relating to that topic. And one final thing I want to mention is, Sarah brought this up too, briefly, is that my recommendation always to be polite and say please and say thank you. And it's good practice for when we deal with humans, but it also works with AIs. And it's not magic. It's not because they're conscious yet and they have feelings. But going back to that literature model, right? You want to put it into the universe of textual literature where people are polite to each other. And you can imagine, if you're thinking about documents where people are writing in a polite and respectful tone, they're probably more helpful than the documents where people are rude and insulting each other, right? So you don't want to put it into that universe. You want to put it into the nice universe. So some other examples of summarizing. Here is one where I've asked it to summarize the introduction to an academic paper and asked it to organize the citations to compare support versus opposition to a certain theory. So using my model here, right? You're saying, here's the theory, the open access citation advantage, and I'd like you to organize the citations, and the input is this entire introduction section, right? So these are the 3 components. And then once I add these 3 components, then it can do this great job of extracting all of this information from the input I gave it and organizing it so that I can much more easily see what the citations are in that big block of text. Another thing it's great at is study aids, right? And again, you want it to give it the text, right? So you want to give it your, academic paper you're reading. You want to make sure you know it. Have it create questions and answers for that. Have it, create flashcards or ask you tough questions. It can really help as a study aid. And again, you're pasting in that text and you're asking it to do something. Okay. So that's summarization. I think it's a really great use. And the last thing we kind of wanted to cover is, because this is for graduate students, and some of you may be teaching assistants, you may be teaching undergraduates. And so we thought you should be aware of kind of the ethics of using it and some of the issues that have popped up based on its ability to write really, really well, right? And so this has caused a lot of consternation. People are concerned, and how do we use it in higher education, right? So I teach a class, GES 100, and we used to have these 2-page essays. We had like 4 of them. So the first thing I did when I got access to this is, how well can it do this assignment? And so what I did was paste in the entire prompt, paste it in my rubric for how I was going to grade it. And then, it does a great job. And a little bit concerned when this is a great essay. I would have probably given it great marks. It's amazingly like personal. Like its ability to hallucinate is actually really useful in this regard, where it can pretend to be someone else. It can pretend to be a persona. And so, you know, what we did was we actually modified our assignments, right? So we took a look at it, and you know, if the 2-page essays had been crucial, like our class is not an English class, right? We're not teaching people how to write. We're teaching people about environmental issues. So we decided that there was a better way to do that assignment. So we've broken it down and we kind of scaffolded the questions about guiding the students through short answers that we think is less enticing to use this kind of AI to just cheat with. What we don't recommend is using any of these AI detection services. So there's a whole bunch of these that have popped up. You know, GPT-0, you turn it in, they all have like these capabilities now that they claim to be able to detect AI. The problem with this compared to plagiarism detection is that there is no ground truth, right? So you give it a text, there's nothing it can point to say, oh, look, I found this exact match to this text, and so clearly that this student has plagiarized this. It's basically just using like rules of thumb, heuristics, like, oh, I think this writing looks a little robotic. And unfortunately, that's going to lead to a huge number of false negatives. So this is the exact same essay that I asked ChatGPT to make in GPT-0, and it says, no problem, this is human written. And it will lead to even worse false positives. So this is a blog post from 2018 from our university librarian, who I don't believe is a robot. But apparently he's 50% robot according to GPT-0. And so there's no recourse, right? If a student is accused of this, there's nothing they can say other than they hope they have, you know, like version histories in Google Documents or something like that. So we highly advise against this. And it's an unsolvable problem because, you know, writing is just writing, and AI can just write like humans, right? The only way this can be solved is if within one of these products, right, it's possible that OpenAI in ChatGPT could embed secret codes, basically. It's like every 10th word, we're going to choose from this list of words that's going to make their output a little worse, but allow you to detect it. But that would have to be done on each company's product, right? So nothing outside of them could actually do that. So we'll let you know if that happens. So far, it hasn't. But there's been some talk of them doing that kind of thing. And so, you know, if you are TA, you know, or a faculty, you know, design classes, UH has put out some guidance on basically describing the entire spectrum of ways you could incorporate AI and generative AI into your classes, from banning it entirely to allowing students to use it for editing their texts or getting ideas for the texts or creating their texts and then having some kind of discussion that they then include. People have come up with creative ways to do this. And so we encourage you to think about this as well. And this is an example of a professor who's used prompts to basically say, here are some prompts, go and explore this topic with ChatGPT and have a dialogue with it, and then turn that in, right, as your assignment. And so, all right. And so the last thing before we want to give you some time for questions, because I'm sure there are some, we want to talk about future developments. This field is changing faster than anything I've ever seen in terms of technology, much faster than when the internet came or Google came. We gave this first workshop in April of this year, and as an example, we gave the guidance that, oh, you know, you're really limited into how much text you could put in there. Now, 6 months later, that limit has been massively expanded, right? And it's actually opened up a whole bunch of uses. And this is an example from a related field of visual AI, right? So this is 1 year of progress in terms of the ability for AI to create images, and there's a similar increase in text. So there's been a huge amount of change. A lot of the stuff we're talking about warnings may be completely solved by next year. We will do this again and tell you how it's going. But you talked about how these are not connected to databases. Well, people are trying to connect them to database. So one example is illicit.com. They're trying to create a literature review tool. It costs a lot of money, but this is an example of this kind of tool where they have basically the ChatGPT AI read every paper that comes up in the database search and provide a summary for it. They provide a summary of the abstract, or you can actually have a custom column where you tell it, look for a certain variable, right? So in this case, I asked it to look for how is library space being used in that study. And it gives you a summary of that. And this is an example of how you can add extra columns to it. Multimodality is coming. So this is already here. So there's the free version of ChatGPT. If you just sign up for an account, if you pay $20 a month, you get access to the Plus version, which has access to a slightly more sophisticated reasoning version, but also has access to some of the new features such as multimodality, where it can actually see or produce images. So in this case, and so this I don't think has been rolled out to Bard yet, or generally the free ones yet, but it will come quite soon, where you can now give it an image. So for instance, in the academic field, you could give it the image of a graph and say, help me understand this graph. And so I asked it to, give me some reminders of what I should be looking for when I'm reading a graph like this. So it's great for educational sense. And it can see the image and it can identify all the bars, and it does a reasonable job of that. Secondly, data analysis. So we didn't really go into it, but it can actually produce code very well, be it in Python, R, various coding languages. In the GPT Plus, you can actually give it data and have it run that code and produce things. So you could give it this kind of text file and ask it to analyze this data file and create a bar chart. So you can have it do really basic data analysis, and it'll show you the code it's using. It'll explain its reasoning to you. Again, it's extremely useful for learning how to do data analysis, learning how to do the basics of visualization. This is only available Plus, but it'll be rolling out universally soon, I'm sure. So we're including in the future things to watch. And then lastly, Sarah mentioned every week I come. Last week, what happened was they're rolling out these idea of basically fine-tuning kind of custom environments of GPTs, where, as you can see on the right, you can include its own instructions and its own knowledge base. So what I see this happening in the near future is, you say you want a study partner for your math class. You can include the files, all your a bunch of files, that's your reference material, your textbook pages, and then you can have a conversation and it'll use that data without having to paste it kind of clumsily into every prompt, but it'll seamlessly use all that data to have a conversation with you and help you in a much less way that's less prone to hallucinations and fake data, because it has that knowledge base. Okay, so that's it. We encourage you to ask questions. We encourage you to come see us and talk to us. There's only so much we can say in this kind of like bullet speed webinar presentation, but I personally love to talk to people about how they're using it and how they want to use it. So we encourage you to come contact us directly. I'm in the sciences and Sarah is the humanities librarian. So you can choose to come to one or the other, or either of us. It doesn't matter. But any questions? Sarah, do you want to say anything else?
Nope. You did a great job.
Thank Thank you. Okay, so in the short amount of time we have remaining for questions, I'll try to get through what I can. So it's clear that AI can be useful to generate ideas or explore topics, though it may not be reliable. So let's just put that disclaimer out there, right? So when should students still be reaching out to human resources? Can you summarize the limitations for AI?
I can take that, Sarah. Yeah, I mean, this is something that we're a little concerned about. You know, Sarah showed how good it is at helping with like crafting Boolean searches, which is kind of like what librarians have always done, right? But in general, at least at this point, I consider it amplifies what you know already, right? So if you know nothing, I would not recommend going to it and having it teach you from nothing, because you won't know when it's giving you lies or when it's giving you not, right? So always, for your first step, I would go to the humans and get that baseline knowledge, and they can help you then equip you with the skills to then go back to that at midnight, and then you can be refreshed by being able to have a dialogue with it. But that's kind of my first recommendation. Sarah, do you agree?
I will just also add that a lot of times Jonathan and I will just be sitting in a room and we'll be talking to each other, and then he will put something in AI and we will see what the answer is, and then we have a kind of conversation about what that output was, and then we rephrase things and delve into it deeper. And so I don't think at all we're suggesting that this is a way for you to get out of talking to humans. It's just another tool to help you to think about your research in ways that you may not have thought about it. And it's a great way to kind of come up with those topics to take to your advisor or to your study group, and have a fuller conversation with them about it. And yes, if you don't know anything, don't necessarily go to AI first as your place to find that information. I agree.
Thank you for emphasizing that. Okay, someone's asking, should we be worried about our thoughts and work being plagiarized down the road since the app keeps our input?
I'm not sure plagiarized is the right term for it. So yes. So the short answer is yes. If you sign up for the free account, I mean, if you have the paid account, there's a setting where you say, don't use my data. And if you trust them, then they're supposed to not use their data in their training. If you use the free account, it will be included in their training sets. So I would highly recommend not putting any sensitive information. Don't put healthcare information or student IDs in there. Don't do that. In terms of plagiarism directly, it's almost impossible for it to directly output a whole block of your work. But it certainly could incorporate ideas. So I would say, yes, it's a concern and you should be aware of it.
Yeah, and I will add that in Bard, it's free. And so you have the option of, when you're setting up your account, to set your privacy settings. It's Google, and we use Google for everything at UH. So I feel like they already know a lot about us. But it does have a disclaimer of that you should not be putting in your personal information or identifying information, but you can turn off a lot of settings so it's not saving things and it's not using it to learn. So I don't know if you trust them. Yeah.
Speaking of Bard and ChatGPT, someone else mentioned Bing. Are there brief bullet points you can give about the differences for the various AI?
I pretty much only use ChatGPT mostly because I pay for it, so I want to get my money's worth. It seems to work well. I'm not aware of any real specializations in them yet. Are you, Sarah? Would you say that
No.
Bard is better for anything in particular? I'm not
I
aware
think
of that.
Bard is helpful in having you come up with questions and things. It always is going to give you recommendations of related searches or questions, just like Google Scholar does if you use Google Scholar. A lot of the features that you can use in ChatGPT, so uploading images and data and things like that, having it create Python and stuff, you can do that in Bard. So I use Bard because it's free.
All right.
And
Nice.
I'm able to do a lot of the things that Jonathan does. I do feel that sometimes ChatGPT is a little more sophisticated in kind of like the language and the tone that it uses when you are trying to be specific with the outputs, but you're able to, if you are really specific in your prompt, you can work around that. But I think they're very similar. I
Yeah,
think that
I agree.
ChatGPT was based off of Google's whatever that face palm or language palm or whatever that is. And so I think I think ChatGPT developed faster, but I think
it's all the
slowly
same underlying
coming up.
technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all running on the same technology.
We're basically at time, but I'm just going to squeeze in one last question. Someone posted, I know they recently added the custom instruction settings on ChatGPT. Are there any recommendations on what to put in here to better use it as an academic?
Yeah, I'll show that for people who don't know. So this is ChatGPT interface. And if you go down here in your profile, there's a custom instructions. So I don't have anything right now. I have used it in the past. So it basically, you could think of it like it adds text to every single one of your prompts without you having to do it, right? So sometimes you could say basically who you are, and it puts it into the right universe, right? I am an academic librarian. And so as soon as it does this, then it's not going to give you something wildly, in a different universe. It's going to try to modify its responses to that. So if you're a faculty, I recommend putting you've got a little research profile on your website. You could put that in there. Put as much information as you want that it'll personalize its responses to you. Sometimes I forget though, and I have to delete it because it's like, oh, I need an example where it's not doing that. But if you're using it for the same thing, often it's very useful.
Thank you. And for those who still have questions, because I know there are a couple questions in the Q&A, and we're at 12 o'clock already, I put Jonathan and Sarah's email addresses in the chat box. So if you want to copy that down and reach out to them directly, they have offered themselves as resources. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Mahalo to Jonathan Young and Sarah Nakashima from Hamilton Library for leading our session today. Again, if you have a chance, please do fill out the eval so that we can get feedback from you today. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.
Thank you.